saw yesterday on the same, well, like in the final 500 meters of the Ventoux.
And I think you've got to think about every you know, 2 stages left out of Ventoux. Both are to be raced. This is not a pan flat sprinter's day. This stage is open. Tomorrow's stage is wide open. I say this is open. We've currently got a break 5 minutes up the road, but you know, this is not a day where you think I cannot take any time at all. It's a day where a lot of different scenarios could play out, and those are the interesting team meetings, because you've got to almost preempt all those different scenarios, talk about what you would do in each one, and that's a lot of information to take in. And of course you can communicate with your DS during the race, but all those scenarios do need to be discussed beforehand. And of course they've just gone through that feed zone there. Peloton really spread across the road, so pace just coming off.
Time for a new department, the Département des Alpes-Maritimes.